This is the Pro Audio Suite podcast. Quick Bites.
Welcome to another Pro Audio Suite Quick Bite. This week we are minus George and Robert because Robert's at NAB and George is spending time with his daughter.
Having a bit of personal time.
Excellent.
The good thing about that is we can talk about them behind their backs, though.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what do you reckon about last week? Well, anyway,
dear.
Now we were going to do this week RX, Isotope, Waves, Bruce Lee Shootout, but we'll do that in the coming weeks. But this one, we thought we'd jump in because I just downloaded or bought the new version of WaveLab Elements 9.5. Because I was having issues with an updated RME card that then wouldn't talk to WaveLab, and then realised my version of WaveLab was so old, I'm surprised it didn't have to have the heads cleaned. But,
where is that metho? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Metho and a cotton bud. See, there with it. No one will know what you're talking about.
No, exactly. They think you start a fire. Yeah,
that's right.
Light
or clean your ears.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway,
well,
so you've also downloaded it. What is your thoughts?
Well, look, I was interested to hear you talking about it, and so I thought I'd sort of download the demo version and have a look. I guess I should preface all this by saying I've been on Pro Tools for 20 plus years. And I do know a little bit about Adobe Audition, and I've also used that in its early incarnation as Cool Edit Pro as well. So I guess what I'm trying to say is what I have to say isn't necessarily a negative reflection on the software. It's just my observations coming from using other software. So I just wanted to preface that first. But I guess with that in mind, my first impression was, for me, I didn't find it very intuitive. But as we were talking about before we started recording, I had to get used to the idea that I'm not working a multi-track session here. I'm actually just editing a WAV file. And the timeline as I know it is a different beast in WaveLab than it is in Pro Tools, and it's a completely different way of working. So, but that was my first impression, was I didn't find it completely intuitive. I found it kind of difficult to get my head around. In fact, I had to ring you to figure out how to put a plug-in on.
Yeah, that's right.
Whoops.
Well, it's interesting because I know a lot of people use this as their mastering DAW.
And I can imagine that people would use it for mastering because, having now played around with it a bit more and sort of dug a bit deeper, if you were just working with a stereo file and wanted to master it, absolutely. I mean, it's totally the way to go. So, yeah, I mean, I played around with some of the EQs and compressors that came with it. I was particularly impressed. They've got one or a suite, like a RX sort of suite of plugins, and it's called the Mastering Module. This is probably not stuff as a voiceover artist you would want to play with, but it's got a dynamics plugin, which is obviously compression, EQ, saturation, which is tape or tube saturation, and imaging, which is your stereo imaging. Left and right, blah blah. I found that really interesting, and the EQ and especially the compression. The compression seems to be 2-band, which is kind of nice. So you've got you can run one setting over the lower end of the frequency range and another one over the higher end of the frequency range, which could be useful. But yeah, look, for a voiceover artist who just wants to maybe record in and just spit out, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, well, look, I find that I've just got used to it, I guess, because it was the first proper DAW I got. I did actually buy another version, which was 7 or 8, I can't remember, and I put it on my laptop on the Mac, and I couldn't work out how to use the thing on the Mac, so I dumped it, and I went to Twisted Wave on the Mac.
So when you travel, you don't use WaveLab, is that what you're saying?
No, I used Twisted Wave, and that came from George, actually, because he said about it, and I chucked it in. I thought, man, this is so easy.
Yep. So now that you've bought a Waves plugin to use while you were away, didn't you?
Yes, I've got a Waves, the Shep 73.
Yeah. Have you tried that in here? Have you tried running that over your usual setup?
No, I haven't, because everything I've got is outboard.
Yeah.
So I don't use any plugins at all.
Yeah.
The only thing I would ever think about doing would be having to get rid of clicking and
declick. Yeah, see, I played around with that a little bit. I recorded some of my voiceover and actually intentionally recorded some mouth clicks and, some pops and things like that just to play with the RX stuff and see how it worked in there. It's not bad. It seems to be very DSP hungry as opposed to Pro Tools for some reason. Maybe that was just the way I was using it without having been a long-time user. That could be part of it. So in terms of running it on your laptop, I think you'd probably want a bit of memory to burn, but other than that, I guess the thing is the hardest thing for me to get used to was massaging a wave file as opposed to mixing a wave file, which is two sort of different things. I mean, in Pro Tools, you can do a similar thing. You can use your plugins as an audio suite plugin, which means that you directly affect the clip. You don't just put it as a plugin on a track. But I rarely use that. I mean, the things that I would use from there is just like a normalization. And sometimes if I've got a file that is fairly clicky or poppy, a voiceover that comes in, I will run a D-click or a D-pop over that. But 9.999 times out of 10, I'll use it as a plugin. So that was the hardest thing for me to get my head around, was just the fact that I'm working on a WAV file, not so much on a timeline. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when you first opened the window, what was the one thing that you thought was weird?
I said it to you before. The show. I don't understand why I'm looking at two windows. You see the waveform twice. You've got it in a little window up the top, and then you've got the big waveform that you work on.
I think I know why that is because if you look at the small one at the top, you can actually see the whole session.
It's a bit like an overview, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, so you can actually find out where you are in the session.
It's very interesting to look at some of the plugins that come with it and some of the editing tools that come with this version of it, and I'm not sure whether there's even more in the Pro.
There's a lot in the Pro.
Is there? Yeah, right. Because I was interested to see that there's a retune, so you can actually change pitch, which sort of says to me that there's people out there who sort of throwing vocals in here and changing parameters and then loading it back into whatever their usual workstation is for mixing music. So that was kind of interesting. They had another function, which is the 3D frequency analysis.
Yeah.
So yeah, I nice, looks pretty. I'm not sure how I'd use that because as opposed to just a normal frequency analyzer. But
I think what it is, and look, I'm not a tech guy at all, and I've seen that thing on the old version I had. But I was watching a guy doing a demonstration of WaveLab 9.5, and he looked at that, and I kind of got it.
Right.
Because it's 3D, you can actually slide the whole thing around and you can see where those points are that you may want to EQ.
Oh, I tried moving it around, but I didn't have
you can do completely turn it around so you can see where these bits actually really do sit in a three-dimensional picture.
Here it is. Right. I've just figured that out. There we go.
So
okay.
that could be kind of handy when you're digging to find this weird thing that frequency you want to either enhance or get rid of. You will find it much easier in a 3D image, I would have thought.
If you've got a funny little clicky thing going on or some ambient noise in the background that you can't quite find, it would be interesting to compare, maybe a second or two before and a second or two after to what's happening exactly at that moment.
Yeah.
And see what rears its head. Yeah, okay. I get that now. I'll give them that.
Yeah, so that could be cool. So that could be handy.
Yeah.
The only thing, it was funny because this is what I thought you would jump on straight away, but you haven't. My buddy Pip, who's just moved down here, he came around when I was setting up the RME, and he helped me set up the new Total Mix. And one thing that he looked at when he fired up a record, he said, "Where's the waveform? There's no waveform."
Yeah.
You don't get it until you stop recording, and then it pops up.
That didn't bother me. See, because you've got some pretty good meters there, some metering going on, which is enough. I don't. Maybe from my analog days that doesn't bother me because I've got the meters there to keep my eye on.
Okay.
So but that's an interesting point though. It is, and it's funny how we've become used to that. I mean, you sort of, I do it now even while I'm recording, with Pro Tools open in front of me, I glance across to make sure that the clip's still red and there's a waveform in it. So, I suppose that's understandable, I guess. But
yeah, but the one thing I do like about this version, which certainly wasn't on the last two I bought, the whole of the recording box, when you hit record, that thing pops up with the metering in it, goes red.
Yes. Yeah, that's kind of nice,
great.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I like that a lot.
And I don't know if you've played with it and I didn't get the chance, but I noticed there was a podcast template. Did you have a look at that? Have you had a look at that at all?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, okay. Well, actually, I've got it open. Let's just see if I can even find it. But there was a template that just said podcast, and maybe this is for another episode.
Yeah, interesting.
No, not there in front of me, but I'll find it. There was definitely a podcast setting. So it made me wonder whether that's just we're just going to record in a way that they think is easier for podcasting, or for someone who's not quite sure exactly about all the other functions of this, just to keep it simple, whether it opens up a template that gets rid of all the stuff that you would look at and go, well, what the hell does that do? Just leaves the basic functions there, or what? But yeah, I kind of thought that was interesting. So
yeah.
As much as we talked about Rode and them specialising in podcasting, it's interesting to see other people are starting to think about it too.
Oh, absolutely. Why wouldn't you? The thing I didn't mention when we talk about the WaveLab 9.5 Pro as opposed to this one, which is the Elements, I noticed Pro has isotope plugins as part of the deal. Nice.
That's probably why they charge so much, $900 or something, I think.
Yeah. But it's definitely got isotope gear in there, so that's
right. It's interesting that like we've talked about this before, but it is so fast becoming the standard in terms of noise reduction that it's just crazy.
It's funny, and also talking about standards, I was looking at some Facebook stuff today, but someone asked the question, should I get Source Connect? Interestingly, there was a huge amount of comments, and it looks like that the pendulum has swung towards Source Connect as opposed to ISDN.
Right.
It's finally moved over
Probably
that 50%.
Not before time, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, won't that be interesting when people like Steinberg and, some of these other people like Adobe and all that sort of stuff, come out and basically they're all set up and all you've got to do is push a button and you're all set up to send to Source Connect or something.
Well, the thing is that Cubase actually have that as part of their
do they now?
DAW. Yes.
Nice.
But I think it only talks to two-way, I think, is the only way it works.
Right.
From memory. That'd be worth checking out. But that's another one of Steinberg's things.
There you go. The boys are on it.
So what do you reckon out of, if you're going to give it a score?
I having not dived deep into it, but having a cruise across the surface, if you had have asked me before I sort of spoke to you and then got an idea of how it was all working, I would have given it a 4 or a 5. But now having played around, I'd give it an 8.
Oh, cool. That's good.
Having said that, I guess the competition to this in terms of the way it works that I see is actually Adobe Audition just working in their 2-track mode, not in the multi-track mode. I can see how a voiceover artist might go down that route because it does work very similarly. And I would probably just give the edge to Audition in that. But as I said, I haven't spent months sitting behind this to sort of know its full capabilities. But that's my first impression anyway. Interestingly,
the thing we should have talked about before we started talking about WaveLab, the reason I ended up updating, I said at the beginning, was because I updated my RME with an expander and using Total Mix, which then, for some peculiar reason, the drivers in the old WaveLab didn't like it and it kept crashing. So hence the reason I got rid of it. But this is a trick for young players. If you do have an RME PCI card and you decide that you're going to do what I do, which is have like 4 different mic chains going into the PCI card, when you do that, unfortunately, when you hit mute in the Total Mix, it only mutes to monitors. It doesn't mute to record.
Ah.
And I can tell you now that was an absolute, it was a head scratcher. So I ended up getting a guy based in Melbourne here, a guy called Lee at Innovative Music. Should give him a plug because he jumped on with TeamViewer and he managed to reconfigure all the stuff inside the Total Mix to form a loopback. It was the only way we could do it. So now I've got a loopback that allows me to mute on recording.
Yeah, right.
But yeah,
There you
that
go.
that was a weekend of hell.
Well, here was my interesting one with WaveLab then. I just connected my 002 to record off, and I couldn't figure out. I wanted to make just a mono recording, but using the input 2 off the 002 rack, because that's where my in-studio mic, the one I'm on now, comes up. And I couldn't figure out how to do that. I couldn't figure out how to tell it. It only in mono mode, it only seemed to want to record off input 1. So, when there are like 16 inputs with the digital and the analog and all the rest of it on the 002. So I had to record as a stereo file so that that input 2 was recording on the right channel. The left channel was mute because there was nothing on there. And then fold it down to a mono file before I could start working. So I couldn't figure out how to tell it, okay, I want to record a mono file, but I want to record the mono file off input 2. I found that sort of difficult to figure out. So I'm sure someone will write and tell us there is a way, but that was my first impression.
Well, there you go.
Well, I've got 30 days to trial it, so I'll be playing with it some more, definitely.
Yeah, give it a whirl. See what you find.
Maybe we should have another conversation in 30 days.
Yeah, that's right. And you know what? Most importantly, it looks good.
That's right. You sound like my wife. You say, why'd you buy that? Well, it looks sexy. So,
Yeah, that's right.
Well, then what are you doing with me would be the next question.
Yes.
On that note.
She's just keeping it real.
Yes.
That was the Pro Audio Suite. If you have any questions or ideas for a show, let us know via our Facebook, the Pro Audio Suite Podcast.
You look for trouble.